Beyond the Pillars of Hercules, where the map ends and imagination begins, lay an ocean of endless mystery. Here, isolated from the known world, nature crafted a paradise, rich in soil, timber, and silence. It was a land of singular perfection, with a geometry etched by the gods themselves, waiting for a master. Legend tells of a divine lineage claiming this soil, planting the seeds of a bloodline that would rival the immortals. From the living rock, white, black, and red, the first foundations were hewn, turning raw earth into shelter. They did not merely inhabit the land, they sculpted it. The great rings of water were tamed, bridged, and bound. And deep within the veins of the mountain, they found it, orichalcum, the red fire that would fuel their glory.
A temple rose at the center, a sanctuary not just for worship, but as a declaration of their dominion over the earth.
The ocean was no longer a barrier. It became a highway. The isolation of the island was ending.
Order had emerged from chaos. Atlantis was no longer a dream. It was a breathing, living kingdom. 10 kings ruled in harmony, bound by sacred laws inscribed on a pillar of orichalcum at the temple's heart.
The land gave without reserve, 2 harvests a year, fed by mountain sprongs and the ingenuity of their engineers.
Word of their wealth crossed the waves. The harbors swelled with ships, and the markets overflowed with the treasures of the world.
But prosperity breeds the need for protection. The shipyards turned from merchant vessels to instruments of power.
They mastered the fire. Walls were clad in brass, tin, and the precious red metal, making the city glow like a second sun. Safe behind rings of water and stone, the people of Atlantis believed their golden age would be eternal. Knowledge was their second currency. They mapped the stars and measured the earth long before others learned to write. Ritual bound them to the gods. They hunted the bull without iron, swearing oaths to justice and the preservation of their bond. For a time, virtue reigned. They possessed vast wealth, but were not yet possessed by it. But the boundaries of the island could no longer contain their ambition. The gaze of Atlantis turned outward. To the primitive tribes of the Mediterranean, these visitors were not men, but gods descending from the sea. Influence became control. The council debated not if they should expand, but how far their shadow should reach. Outposts rose on distant shores. Tyrrhenia and Libya fell under their sway, feeding the capital with tribute. Gold flowed into the city like the tides, but unlike the tide, it did not recede. It accumulated. The foundation was set. The empire was built. But in the silence of the temple, the first cracks in their virtue began to show. The city became the center of the world. Through the great canals, the wealth of nations flowed inward. Empire requires submission. Along the coasts of Africa and Europe, kings bowed their heads, trading freedom for Atlantean protection. In the capital, life was a feast. They drank from cups of gold and wore the ocean's pearls, forgetting the sweat that paid for their luxury.
Art flourished, not just for beauty, but for ego. They built monuments to their gods that looked suspiciously like themselves. The people were kept entertained. In the roar of the crowd and the thunder of hooves, the silence of contemplation was lost. But peace is the enemy of a war machine. The generals looked east, toward the only powers that still dared to stand alone. The forges burned through the night. Plowshares were beaten into swords. The time of trading was over. The time of taking had begun.
They believed it was their destiny to rule. Not just the ocean, but the earth itself.
They passed the Pillars of Hercules, a swarm of bronze and timber, blocking out the horizon.
To the people of the coast, it was not an invasion. It was a force of nature, inevitable and terrifying.
The blood of the gods had diluted. The divine portion within them faded, replaced by human. Justice was replaced by tyranny. They no longer brought civilization. They brought chains.
Even the sacred rituals became hollow. performances for the public rather than prayers to the gods. Whispers of dissent began to circulate in the dark alleys of the Golden City. Not everyone was blind to the rot.
They marched on Athens, but for the first time, they met resistance that steel alone could not break. The invincibility of Atlantis was a myth they had told themselves for too long. Reality was proving far sharper. While their armies bled abroad, the skies at home turned dark. The earth itself seemed to groan.
Reason had fled the court. The king ordered more ships, more men, more blood, blind to the warnings written in the wind.
Golden City was now built on a foundation of bones. The cries of the enslaved rose higher than the prayers of the priests. Nature gave the first warning. The springs that had flowed for centuries began to falter. Those who watched the stars saw it coming. Alignment of doom, a shifting of the earth's deep pillars. The ground trembled, a gentle warning. But the people were too deafened by their own greatness to listen.
Unity fractured. Brother turned against brother. The empire was rotting from the head down.
Far away, the free men of Athens stood alone, a flickering candle against the coming storm. It was the eve of their greatest victory, or so they thought. But arrogance is a heavy shield. On the muddy plains of Attica, the weight of their own armor became their tomb.
The Athenians fought not for conquest, but for survival. And against that spirit, the mercenaries of Atlantis shattered.
Even the sea, once their ally, turned traitor. Winds howled against them, scattering the greatest.
The order was given. For the first time in history, the armies of Atlantis turned their backs to the enemy. They returned not as gods, but as broken men. The illusion of invincibility had been washed away by blood and salt.
The city did not welcome them with laurels, but with stones. The social fabric, already stretched thin, began to tear.
But the defeat in Athens was merely the prelude. The true judgment was gathering in the heavens above.
The earth groaned. A deep, guttural sound that vibrated in the bones of every living thing.
The beasts knew first. They fled the forests, driven by an instinct that screamed of the end. Then, the ground betrayed them. The first shock fractured the temple, splitting the altar of their vanity in two.
It was not a war. It was an erasure. Stone pillars snapped like twigs, and the golden towers bowed to the dust.
The bridges that bound the rings together crumbled, severing the lifelines of the city.
Then, the ocean took a breath. The waters receded, pulling back to reveal the naked seabed, coiling for the strike.
And it returned, not as a tide, but as a mountain of water, dark and cold, rushing to reclaim. The great walls, built to withstand armies, were nothing against the wrath of the ocean.
The streets became rivers. The homes became tombs. There was no high ground, no sanctuary.
From the high palace, they watched their world drown. All their gold could not buy them another hour of breath. Fire met water. The mountain tore itself apart, vomiting ash and stone, burying what the sea had not yet swallowed. Centuries of knowledge, star charts, and laws washed away in a heartbeat. History was being unwritten.
In the face of the end, titles mattered nothing.
The island grew heavy with its own sins. The foundations snapped, and the great city began its final descent.
In a single day and night of misfortune, the earth opened its mouth, and Atlantis vanished from the sun. Where there was once light and music, there was now only the roaring silence of the sea. A shroud of mud remained, a scar of the ocean, forbidding any ship from crossing where the empire once stood. Down into the abyss it went. The dream was over. The legend had begun. The city was gone, but the memory survived. In the temples of Egypt, priests whispered the tale.
Through Solon, the story reached Plato. He penned the words that would haunt history, a great power that marched from the Atlantic.
The scrolls turned to dust, but the idea refused to die. Medieval mapmakers drew phantom islands.
Explorers sailed into the unknown, driven by the rumor of lost cities. They found new worlds, but the old one remained hidden. Scholars asked, how did pyramids rise on both sides of the ocean? Was there a mother culture? A bridge that sank? Science took up the torch. Sonar pierced the dark, searching for the geometry of a lost civilization in the chaotic seafloor. Stones were found, roads leading to nowhere, walls protecting nothing, clues that teased but never answered. Others looked to the desert, seeing the rings of Atlantis etched into the skin of Africa, dried and dead for eons. The truth became legend, and the legend became fantasy. Atlantis became a dream of what we wish we could be. But the ocean keeps her secrets well. The deep Atlantic is a vast, silent grave that gives up nothing.
Yet, Plato did not write a fantasy. He wrote a warning.
We build by the water. We defy the natural order. We assume our golden age will last forever. The hubris of the Atlantean kings flows in our veins. The desire for more, the belief that we are masters of the earth.
Civilizations rise like the sun, and they set just as surely.
Power is fragile. Stone crumbles. Gold sinks. Only the ocean remains.
The waves that roll today are the same that swallowed the empire. They hold no judgment, only silence. We search for the stones, but the true legacy of Atlantis is not a place. It is a question. How long can a civilization stand before it forgets its virtue? How high can we build before we fall? Under the waves, life continues. The coral builds new kingdoms on the bones of the old. History is a tide. It brings great things, and it washes them away.
Somewhere in the deep, the red metal still glows, waiting for a world that remembers how to see it. The Lost Empire, the Golden City, the cautionary tale etched in water. Atlantis.